The software developer calls the NSA and hears the following welcome message. Thank you for calling the NSA, the only organization that actually listens to you.
Yeah, they listen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another video cast. I'm Wolfi, as always. With me is Elad. And we both welcome you to this special edition. We talk about lesson practice and a hint for coaches and Scrum Masters. So what triggered this special edition? Well, Elad has started a new job, and we want to take this opportunity for Elad to tell more from the inside. So Elad, will you introduce to us what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's not a lot, actually. I mean, a lot, but not a lot. So right now I'm focusing on two activities. I would split it like roughly in learning and unlearning. So the learning part is like I'm new. I've joined a new organization. I'm learning to get to know the people. I'm learning the processes. I'm learning the business domain and the technology domain and like any basic aspect that there is. At the same time, as you know, and probably some of our viewers also know, I used to be an external coach for many, many, many years, 12, but who's counting? So I need to unlearn a lot of habits. I think I not have to, but I want to unlearn this coach perspective, external perspective, this detachment, kind of like I'm not really owning the things that we do, right? But now I feel accountable for the outcomes. So learning and unlearning, it's interesting because some of the practices are the same, but the mental models are a bit different.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So today I have two questions for you, Elad. So the first one is, since you now joined the company to work as an R&D director, I believe you call yourself now, what do you see as the biggest problems in becoming an adaptive organization?
Yes. You probably know me, biggest problems is like a scary term for me. So I would say that let's talk about like problems that I'm experiencing, major problems, like not smaller ones, okay? So there's tons, of course, but let's focus on two. Traditional thinking, let's call it that, or the less political correct approach would be to say ignorance, not in a bad way. And then fear of mistakes or lack of psychological safety. Two topics that I've encountered many times in the past, but also in my new organization to a certain extent, of course. So traditional thinking, it means that many of us, we make decisions based on stuff that we know, right? Like quote unquote, things that have been passed on from generation to generation and are considered absolute truth. And people treat them as facts, even though often it is not the case. I mean, we probably, in the LeSS community, we are very focused on like trying to burst some bubbles of misconceptions. What people often refer to as common sense or just common knowledge or stuff like that is just plain wrong, just misinformation. It has no scientific data or anything similar to back this up. Not even, often not even anecdotal data. It's kind of funny. So we need to deal with that. It's kind of sad that people feel that way. You know, examples, long-term planning. Now I know some of our viewers, I'm going to them, what are you talking about? Yes, just things that are ROI negative, almost always. Yearly budgeting, top-down management, performance reviews and all of those kind of stuff that are considered true or like mandatory are actually often create the opposite impact and reduce our effectivity and doesn't deliver the results that we want. So that's major problem number one, ignorance. And again, not that someone is stupid, it's just lack of knowledge. Very smart people. Another example, again, or another major problem, as I mentioned, is this lack of psychological safety or fear of mistakes or fear of failure or whatever you want. A million books about it. All of them talk about that in different terminology, but the concept is the same. Am I willing to face mistakes? Am I willing to accept the fact that mistakes are actually important? I want to make mistakes. Mistakes makes me stronger, makes me understand better. If I do it through a prisma of like lack of ignorance, because if I have a specific perspective on something, then I may even misinterpret the mistake. We know that from the like early 2000s when people started adopting Scrum and people experienced a lot of pain by adopting Scrum. And the first conclusion is that Scrum sucks. Right? In fact, we know that we are now in 2022 and I don't know numbers or statistics and I don't really care, but we know that Scrum has de facto become the default process in the software industry, regardless of the fact that most of organizations just misimplemented it and misunderstand it. So we need to understand that making mistakes is important, and we need to try and create an environment in which people do not fear failure. They invite it, smart failure, of course, right? We don't like to fail just for no reason. But if they are learning from that, that's good. So all organizations state that they want to improve and they want to grow and learn, right? And a prerequisite of that is being able to change things. So if you do the same thing, I think improving would be extremely difficult. So to change something is rarely risk-free, right? And so we need to make that change something that we are able to deal with. If we change something and it will trigger that fear, and that will cause us to push back and our egos to push back, we even reduce the chances of the change succeeding. Not to talk about the fact that many people will not challenge the status quo, not make suggestions, not try to create a new process or stuff like that. So the advice, you didn't ask about advice, but I'm going to give it anyway. Try it, and generic advice. Try to build a workspace in which it is okay to make mistakes. It is okay to challenge the status quo. It is okay to ask really stupid questions, quote unquote, and ask them again and again and try to, and it's okay to protect an opinion that you have rigorously. As long as you're respectful to the other person, it's okay. Let's continue that. Yeah. I would say like creating this workplace is one of the, of course, it's super hard, right? What I'm saying, it's not like let's create this workplace. We have to change behaviors sometimes of hundreds of people. Yeah. But I think then summarizing, this ignorance and lack of psychological safety are definitely two things that are painful. I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you. Very, very good insight. I will come back to this in a moment. But first, I would like to ask you the second question I have. So So what advice do you now have for all the LeSS trainers, coaches, Scrum Masters, practitioners who try to adopt LeSS in their organizations?
It's a lot of responsibility not to give an advice. So my first advice is don't listen to my advice, okay? My second advice would be, it's still early for me to give an advice from the perspective of the R&D leader or whatever, because again, I'm not feeling comfortable in my seat just yet. I'm still learning and unlearning, as I mentioned previously. But what would be a generic advice, I think, for managers, for coaches, for Scrum Masters, for everyone? And you probably heard that one before, but you can't hear it too many times. I think I know for myself that I also need to hear that advice from time to time, get a reminder. And that is be humble. Just face reality. We don't know lots of stuff. We really don't. We may think we do. Let me give you an example from here. I started in that organizations, and I'm joining meetings, and I'm learning, and I'm observing stuff. And then I was in a meeting, and I asked a question. I asked about something, really a humble inquiry, question about why, what are the reasons that they chose? Maybe it's something in the way that I phrased the question. Maybe it's something else. I don't really know, but it triggered an emotional reaction from the person I was asking. And I got like a really powerful pushback. I felt that my question triggered this really strong emotional reaction with the person. Now, thankfully, I'm prepared for that. I've been a coach for many years. I got my share of emotional responses, especially when, mirroring stuff to people or reflecting stuff. So I knew such a thing could happen. So luckily I am equipped with the tools. But I didn't know that this will happen, right? So going back to the be humble, we don't really know what's going to happen. There's a lot of unknowns. And maybe an analogy from one of my hobbies. We need to be able to work with partial information. And in one of my hobbies, I play amateur poker. And poker is a game of making decisions in face of partial information, right? If we play, I have my cards, you have your cards. I don't know what your cards are. I only have partial information regarding what's going on, and I have to make optimal decisions, right? So it's interesting. And a professional poker player knows that the decisions are optimized for long-term success. They are not expecting to win each hand, even what more so, they are expecting not to win every hand. The poker player that wins every hand is a total anomaly or probably non-existent situation. Or they are not even bluffing, they're just faking something. It's a con. Okay, so poker players are trained to work with partial information. They understand that in face of reality, mistakes will happen, and the trick is to learn from that mistake and optimize for the long term. In the software professionals, this is not the case. We act in a very non-humble manner that does not acknowledge the level of uncertainty that is embedded in software development. So summarizing, this may be a little bit all-around question. Be humble. Understand that there's a lot of uncertainty in everything. Remind ourselves and others around us that try not to be frustrated by the fact that there's a lot of unknowns. Be prepared for those unknowns and allow yourself and others room for error, even emotional error. It's also okay to burst from time to time. It's not fun, but I assure you that the person that got really this emotional from my question, didn't really intend to do that. Okay, so
yeah,
be humble. And I try to remind that myself as well, because we are all human. Sometimes we are arrogant.
okay. Thank you, Elad. And yeah, I have a few insights really from this. So actually, your answer to the first question reminded me a little bit on Yves Merieux's TED Talk, where he describes that typically or very often we build organizations which are designed to fail, but in a compliant way. You know? And that's really like because we have all the structures, processes, measurements, and whatever. Yeah. So yes. this is very nice, and in this way also I share your concern that I have also seen organizations who don't want to experiment, where even the word, hey, we want to make an experiment was forbidden. So you was not allowed to use the word experiment. So the question is, how can these organizations learn? You know? So that is really, really a big thing. Yes, I share your thoughts there. And the second question actually triggered some very interesting insights also, like we see maybe sometimes so-called agile coaches, Scrum Masters, who themselves are not capable to adapt to the situation. And isn't that also a certain way of adaptiveness, flexibility, what you can demonstrate, you know, so that you show to others what it means and that you actually have the tools to cope with this. And also you have been trained to do that, because that's also something I think what you need to train. So something happens and then you are a trained professional so that you can adapt then. And then what you are describing came to my mind, nonviolent communication. So even the other person reacts in an outburst, you still have the giraffe ears on and you say, okay, well, you learn something from this, but you don't accelerate this also, and you escalate the situation. So, but that's also, I think, a skill what people certainly should remember maybe to have in this way.
That's an amazing insight. This coaches that are trying to teach organizations to be adaptable and are not, and have a lot to improve in adaptability themselves.
Yes.
I bet I have a few examples. If I look back on my history, I bet I've been there multiple times. Wow. Okay, and that's already the end of the session for today. So, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. We hope that you have found this video valuable, and invite you, please post comments down below and ask questions if you have any, suggest any other topics for potentially further episodes. So both of us, we have planned to make video casts. Yes, we do.
Yes.
And we apologize for the frequency dropped a little bit. We hope to go back to normal cadence.
Yes, so we are really trying to work and find the time for this so that we have more time again to do them, because they are at least pretty much fun for us. Okay, so with these last words, bye-bye. Until next time. Bye-bye.